Dennis Quaid's Reagan. I'm calling it Dennis Quaid's Reagan. He's just starring.
He's just an actor.
Yes, but he really was not just literally the face of this, but sort of felt like the face of the whole effort and the whole brand. I mean, he's the only person with any sort of remaining movie star Hollywood clout that is associated with this thing. And ironically, I don't think this movie's going to hurt him at all because he looks incredible in the Substance trailer, the Demi Moore movie, where he's playing like a kooky, weird villain guy. He's going to be fine. What do you have any background on Reagan, where this movie came from, how it got made, like what the deal is?
Yeah,
like, why did Reagan happen? Because this feels like a movie that like isn't even good enough to be on Fox Nation as a TV movie, much less be like in theaters in a pretty, a wide release. Where did this freaking thing come from?
It's been in production since like 2010, Brett, like since 2012. And John Voight, just side note, has been attached the entire time. That's like the only person that's like stayed the course. John Voight plays a Russian spy that actually grows over the years to love Ronald Reagan. Anyway, so he's always been attached to this project, but it's been in just getting funding hell for a very long time. Eventually, Mark Joseph, the producer, who was like a record producer. Actually, Mark Joseph's record producing career, by the way, is so crazy. He worked with like Lauryn Hill, Blink-182, Switchfoot, and Creed, which is why Scott Stapp's in the movie.
That's why he's in the movie.
Yes. Okay.
I knew it was a favor.
Anyway, this guy, Mark
It's like
Joseph,
when Ed Sheeran showed up in Game of Thrones. I was like, he's just friends with somebody.
Mark Joseph's friends because he produced.
Okay, that makes so
Creed
much
album.
sense. Yeah. More on that later.
It took forever to get the funding together because movies are very expensive, and this is very niche media. There's always been a market of conservative films. Right now, me and Brett are always talking about sort of the Christian rights entertainment wing,
right?
And that's prolific. But before that, there's always been conservative films, like the Dinesh D'Souza and Steve Bannon's movies and all of that stuff. Like, there's always been a market for this kind of thing. It just took forever to put the pieces together.
And you get John Voight, Kevin Sorbo, people
Kevin
like
Dillon.
that. Kevin Dillon popping up in this.
You do.
So
all that's to say is like it was a labor of love for weird Mark Joseph, the No Safe Spaces, PragerU, Adam Carolla guy. And they really wanted to believe in this. They really wanted the Reagan project up, and they finally got it together. And Showbiz Direct did the distribution, and here we are.
And Reagan it's like, oops.
Actually, you know what? One more thing I remember.
I ain't got the riz to go the Diz. My glasses just fell
you
apart
don't
on
have
the
the
live
riz.
stream.
Hold on, wait, sorry. One more thing I just remembered
please.
was like Mark Joseph was at home and he watched remember that 2-part documentary during COVID, The Reagans?
Yes, I do.
That lit like a tremendous fire under his
because that was
apparently.
critical. That was a critical.
It was like sort of critical.
Okay,
a sort of critical.
It was just
look.
The facts.
He saw that and that reignited his passion. He was like, no, we have to tell the
Right.
Gipper's tale true.
Because this movie is the simplest way to put it is just like unapologetically propaganda.
Sorry, just to be very clear, this
yeah.
movie is a beat for beat greatest hits collection of Reagan's moments performed by Dennis Quaid for 2.5, which seemed like 5,500 hours.
It's
right,
a
Brett?
movie
Like,
for Reagan fanboys to stand up and go, yes.
It's just all you see, all of it. Like, oh yeah, he did the microphone line at the debate. He's eating jelly beans.
Right.
Oh, he left a note for his weird
He's wearing
wife
the
on
cowboy
mirror.
hat.
Oh, he's wearing the cowboy hat.
Yeah.
Oh, he got Alzheimer's. The whole thing.
Yeah. It's not just it's not just a bad movie. It is like a cheap looking movie. This movie is held together by tape. It is there's certain scenes where I'm like, did you mean to have that in the movie? Like I think you should have there's stuff that just feels like mistakes.
It doesn't even feel
the cast
like
is so low rent. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean and that's why I think it got its worst reviews from these stalwart conservative like old-fashioned news sources like the National Review is because it was like not in trying to be this hagiography of Ronald Reagan, it was so cheap that it came off as this like cheap, tawdry tribute to Ronald Reagan, and not like a sophisticated, not like this, not like the deserving tribute that this great man deserves, So it's like it's not just bad in propaganda. It's so cheap and low rent. It really feels like one of these like God is not dead Fox Nation TV movies.
Right.
It feels like at that level, but it's also like a big 2.5-hour Reagan biopic. Like it's a big old biopic. it's so bad and so cheap that it ends up the effect of the movie, and this is also what I think pissed off National Review. It does the opposite of what it's trying to do. And I'm not going to give the movie credit for anything I'm about to say, because the movie's trying to do the opposite. It's trying to be a glowing Reagan biopic. But what it actually creates is this like devastating satire of this guy that like can't even get like a proper like full prestige Hollywood biopic. The movie's like accidentally avant-garde at times in how bizarre and like the cheapness becomes this sort of like bizarre surrealism at times, where you feel like you're watching a movie mocking Ronald Reagan sometimes, because of how like sort of empty and silly and cheap the praise is and the glory is. It's often like very unintentionally very funny.
Yes.
Scott Stapp as Frank Sinatra being a prime example, which we'll talk
Didn't
about.
realize it happening.
And in the midst of all this chaos, you know, the movie is like crumbling in on itself at all times. You also have Dennis Quaid trying to give like an Oscar performance. Like Dennis Quaid is going so hard in the middle of all of this cheapness. Dennis Quaid is going so hard, and I think was like, I might sneak an Oscar nom out of this. Like he's like, why would you put that much effort as an experienced actor if you did? Like he
had nights where he thought that.
He's trying to do the physical mannerisms. I mean, he ends up, you know, looking like Stan Laurel with like lockjaw, but he's like trying to do the like Reagan mannerisms. He really tried to immerse himself in the character and give like a big prestige performance, which makes the whole effect of the movie even more surreal and bizarre. I'm gonna list, Joe, if you don't mind,
please.
And feel free to cut me off at any time.
Okay.
But I just want to like list some things that happen in the movie Reagan. These are just some things that happen in Reagan, just to give you an idea. Because look, none of you should see this movie. None of you are going to see it. So let me just tell you some things that happen in this movie, and we can all just sort of have fun, you know, thinking about this. Number one, they're in the when Reagan is still like a Hollywood actor. There's a scene in the Coconut Grove. Classic. So many scenes that are just like the cheapest version of like a classic scene. So this is the scene like in a 1940s Hollywood movie where all the actors are at the Coconut Grove. And then in the background, you hear this like lounge singer singing. And then like Reagan is at the table with Dalton Trumbo, and he's like going back and forth with Dalton Trumbo. And they just give the most like insulting depiction of Dalton Trumbo as this like whiny little loser and hypocrite. And then in the background, you're hearing this like lounge song, you know, and then they hard cut to someone who is just unmistakably Scott Stapp from Creed in like a fancy little 1940s suit with his hair slicked back, and he's singing some sort of 1940s standard, and then they cut away just as quickly, and this cut is like they cut to him and he's ready for his close-up. He's just mugging for the camera singing, and it's clearly Scott Stapp from Creed. And then they cut away and they keep going on with the scene, and they never come back to him at all. And I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, that's funny. But I was like, I thought he was like supposed to play Frank Sinatra in this movie. And they don't cut back to him. And again, I was the only person in my theater. I got on my phone, I go on IMDb, and I was like, I expected to see the credit as like Scott Stapp, Coconut Grove singer. It says Scott Stapp, Frank Sinatra. I was like, okay. The movie doesn't identify him as Frank Sinatra.
I had no idea.
They don't say the words Frank Sinatra. Nope. He's just Scott Stapp singing like lounge songs.
Like maybe
in
it's
the Coconut
Fly Me to the
Grove.
Moon. Maybe it's Cole Porter. Like,
it's not, but it's not
recognizable.
It's not a super recognizable Frank Sinatra. I can't remember what it is, but it's some standard. It's some like 40s standard. They never say Frank Sinatra. They never cut back to him. They never make a point about being Frank. Like he doesn't stop by the table afterwards and it's like, "Hey, Ronnie, you should be president." You know, there's none of that.
Right, I know.
It's like they just were like, "Yeah, he's like it's like they told Scott Stapp, yeah, well, you'll be Frank Sinatra," but then they were like, we can't like give Scott a scene in the movie where he like acts like Frank Sinatra. They didn't make any effort to like make him look like Frank Sinatra.
He looks nothing like Frank Sinatra. He's not dressed like, you know, at the wee small hours of the evening.
No,
he's got like a hat on.
Doesn't have a
fedora.
Look
anything like him.
It looks. Look, I put a photo of it on our Instagram at Movies Baby. It's just Scott Stapp in a white suit. Okay,
he looks like
and
Richard Cheese.
They just and they're like Frank Sinatra. This is Frank Sinatra, but only in the credits, not in the movie. It is, and again, the movie doesn't get credit for this. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a movie. That like they just cast Scott Stapp as Frank Sinatra, but then didn't say he was Frank Sinatra in the movie. It's kind of amazing. There's a frame narrative to the movie. There's like this overarching narration, and it's really, really great. Jon Voight,
it's so good.
John Voight, who they de-age depending on when you see him.
So weird.
John Voight, who just also they de-age him, but he only does one move in the movie where he looks like fearfully concerned. Like every time they cut to him, he's just like, I don't know. That's his only look.
Yeah,
He is Russian. He's an aging KGB agent who opposes Reagan. He was one of Reagan's, like he was KGB while Reagan was doing his evil empire stuff. But God damn it, does he respect Reagan?
That's right.
He respects Reagan. And so he's a younger protege, a younger Soviet agent comes to him to like get intel on Reagan.
Well, no.
Thank
Brett,
you. Please,
excuse me.
please.
He comes to ask him, if you cared so much about mother country,
thank you.
how could you let Soviet Union collapse?
That's what it is. And
his answer is 2.5 hours long.
Yes.
But TLDR, the answer is Ronnie Reagan, which is historically not true.
Not remotely true. They just like ran out of money because they
like
just
18 million things happen.
The fucking the missile race and
Just
everything.
18
they just ran out of
million
money.
things
Yes,
happen
and
for
18 million
80
things
years.
happen. Yes. So, but it wasn't because Reagan was like, "You tear down that
Tear
wall."
down the wall.
The Soviet Union wasn't suddenly like,
Was
"Oh
a
shit."
Nice moment of political marketing.
But according to this movie and John Voight's narration, this is why the USSR collapsed. It's because
Because like Reagan was so charming.
the narration
that's basically what it
basically
boils down
says,
to.
we thought the USSR would live forever. But then it's almost like biblical because he's like,
But then there was one.
a chosen one arose
Yes.
in the West, a man whose ingenuity and willpower exceeded even
He knew
the
something
best
we
of
did
us.
not know.
This man was born to destroy the Soviet Union, and we had no defense against him, no defense against this
The
great
heart.
man of history,
Because
Ronald Reagan.
we could put all of the guns in the. This is my John Voight Russian impression.
yeah.
All the guns in the world, but he had heart.
And then crossfade into like boy Reagan in church.
Beaten by his parents.
I have never. This is where the movie is like, why are you pushing your luck this much? The movie also, besides trying to like rescue the reputation of Ronald Reagan or like enshrine the reputation of Ronald Reagan, it also weirdly tries to rescue the reputation of Warner Brothers president Jack Warner. Like famously one of just the epic shitheads of the studio age.
History's biggest asshole. Yeah.
The guy who made like Betty Davis's life hell and like
jerk.
like just like from the Louis B. Mayer era, just all those guys were just the worst. They were the worst. They were monsters. For some reason, this movie casts Kevin Dillon from Entourage as Jack Warner. And you know it's Jack Warner because he's got that little pencil-thin mustache, baby. And they present Jack Warner, the only time I've ever seen this, as this like sort of pragmatic good guy. This guy who was just trying to like, I just want to like bring everybody to the bargaining table. The liberals in Hollywood, the conservatives. Let's just keep this picture business going, baby, because it's like we got a good thing going here, and we got to be honest about this. And I'm just a normal guy. I just have normal needs and desires. I'm not a complete fucking weirdo and maniac.
Well, his thing is
Why?
Whatever. I'm going to try to explain the rationale for the
Please.
movie. But like the movie, first of all, the movie is like you're living in the head of a crazy person, like a psychopath. Fox News
Up is
viewer,
down is up.
But like it's one who has been sort of injected with Percocet or something. Like it's someone's like zen. It's like a zenned out sound bath for a conservative psychopath.
That's
and it's just sort of all
that's
washing.
They just
over
luxuriate
you.
it.
It's just washing over you, sort of the affect. But what the pieces
Jack,
I put together.
I knew Jack Warner was really a good guy.
When Ronald Reagan was the head of SAG and Jack Warner was in charge of Warner Brothers, obviously, two different sides of the bargaining table, right? But they had a common cause, their hatred of commies,
Right.
Which is the way that this movie treats
Like Hollywood liberals. And,
no, like the second Red Scare in Hollywood
Yes.
is atrocious. Like
Yeah.
we, like school children, everyone knows Joe McCarthy was overzealous in his attacking
Joe.
of Hollywood liberals.
No, Joe. These Hollywood radicals got way out of hand.
In this movie,
they got
you
way
think that
out
there
of
actually
hand.
was some sort of communist cabal in
Yes.
Hollywood.
They literally say like Soviets were infiltrating Hollywood to like
It's
to influence
insane.
the movies through like Dalton Trumbo and Hollywood liberals.
It's
Yeah,
insane.
it's
And by the way,
insane.
Trumbo, Brett's being very like cerebral about it. Like if you don't know who that is or wasn't paying attention, like you would just think like, oh, a queer-coded man who's bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
it's not like it's some like
yeah.
great, it's like just like very like, oh, the what do they call it? Cultural Marxist left
Yeah.
and their queer allies trying to bring communism and redness
And meanwhile,
up from
these
the bottom up. But
just pragmatic
luckily, Jack
everyman.
Warner and Ronald Reagan were
Yes,
there to
yes,
kind of hash it out backstage.
Yeah. Meanwhile, like what actually happened is that Ronald Reagan got made president of SAG, and then he sold out his colleagues for studio interests. He sold them out for the money.
That's why he was talking to Jack Warner.
Yes, which is the defining aspect of his entire career. Is that what we'll talk about? Is that he is a stooge. He, unlike this movie presents him as. I love when he's like researching communism at night in his house.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like,
Oh, my
it's
God.
Like he's just a puppet. He's
He
just
was like
a fucking
there's one part
stooge.
when he's like out of work and they portray him as a voracious reader who can't learn enough about the Reds.
Yeah. Now, Nancy Reagan's depiction in this movie, obviously they don't depict Nancy as the blowjob queen of Hollywood. They make her this sort of like, spunky, quirky, straight talking, soulmate for Ronald Reagan. But they are, by the end of the movie, they've kind of like unintentionally nailed the essence of Nancy Reagan. I think in trying to make her like, the movie's trying to make her just this like Reagan, this icon of American history. But in doing so, they expose what I think is like the core of Nancy Reagan, which is just this like, the only thing that mattered was enabling Ronald Reagan to like live out his like cosplay fantasies of being a cowboy, of being an alpha man, of being the only guy in the room who knows the deal, right? All Nancy Reagan lived to do was enable those fantasies, and as a result, be the whatever you want to say, the Lady Macbeth behind the scenes, and sort of become the powerful person via Ronald Reagan being out there in public. But she does everything she can in this movie. There are so many scenes where like doctors and different people will come, like professionals will come to her and be like, we need to like after Ronald Reagan gets shot, like you can't see him right now because he's about to die and he needs space, and she's like, no, I've got to see my cowboy lover, and she like rushes into the operating room, is like, Ronald, and he does some quip which never happened in real life. In real life he's like,
I'll get him next time, baby.
In real life his blood is like filling his lungs and he's shitting himself. Yeah, right. But so there's all these scenes though where Nancy Reagan just like
I'll lick him next time.
Yeah, steamrolls just like normal pragmatic advice from professionals in order to live the fantasy life that her and Ronald Reagan are actors. All they want to do was live this like cosplay fantasy life of being these sort of visionary cowboy independents who took over America and made it right again or whatever. Yeah, all she does throughout the movie is try to enable that to happen against all logic and reason. Now that's not what the movie's trying to do, but I felt like unintentionally the movie sort of presents like a sort of realistic depiction of Nancy Reagan almost against its own will, or almost without knowing that it's doing so. She just
charitably,
very
they succeeded. Like,
selfish and
they
narcissistic.
did it. They did live their fantasy life. Like they won all the way to the finish line, and her job was curating the mystique of Reagan and putting him in the right clothes and
running the
out.
country for the last 2 years of his presidency.
Absolutely,
yeah,
that's fine.
And
Ronald was so important and doing such a good job. Let Nancy run the country.
Here's some other things that happen in this movie. There's a scene about halfway through the movie where a Secret Service agent is recruited to be Ronald Reagan's horse riding partner on his ranch. You remember this scene?
Brett, of course. Of course.
So, and it's a full scene. It's a longish scene where some head up guy takes the Secret Service agent aside, and we get to learn the Secret Service agent's whole background, how he rode horses in upstate New York or some fucking place, right? Or outside of Boston or something. And he's like, I know horses well. And the guy's like, all right, none of the other Secret Service agents can keep up with Ronnie on the trails, because Gipper's a hell of a horse rider, baby, and nobody else can keep up with him. We need you to get him. We need a real horse rider to ride with Ronnie on the trails. And so this guy's like, all right, I'll do it. That character then disappears for an hour and a half, like to the point where I was like, did they forget that they had that scene? There are scenes of Ronald Reagan after that. There are scenes of Reagan riding his horse on his ranch, and that guy is not in the scene. And I was like, I was literally like, why did you why did you have this whole scene where this guy agrees to be Reagan's horse riding partner, and then you show Reagan riding horses without this guy? I was like, did you forget? But then,
Okay.
all right,
It was him at
yes,
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
But then the last 5
Okay,
minutes,
okay.
the reason they set this guy up comes back in full force is because
hours later.
this poor Secret Service agent who knows how to ride horses is tasked with like the hardest project in the entire movie, which is telling Nancy Reagan that her husband has dementia, which she is like trying to like not admit to. Because this guy is he's been out riding with Reagan.
That was this. Okay,
This is the
the
sad.
last 7 minutes of the
Yes.
movie. All of a sudden,
It's
like sure it was melodramatic, but like I was borderline like crying. Like dementia and
Nothing
Alzheimer's
sadder.
is so
nothing
difficult to
sadder.
deal with. So like all of a
Yes.
sudden I've just been like fuming for 2.5 hours, and then all of a sudden at the end it's like, oh wait, this is like very human all of a sudden. Like this Reagan has no idea where he is. Like it's sad as shit.
This is why I'm gonna have the tone that I have with this, is because look, nothing sadder and
Dude,
more
it was
traumatic
so
and sad
sad.
than dementia and Alzheimer's.
But it was a little silly.
The movie though
Yeah.
the movie can't admit weakness for
Right.
Reagan, and so the way the movie tries to like power through his dementia and maintain his alphaness is fucking crazy.
I thought it was
And
a
so-
little sweet almost.
Wow.
Brett, I'm not saying it was good.
All right.
I just like the whole topic really it is so sad.
No,
to
I
me.
get it.
You know what I
And
mean?
particularly
It's
if you have
just so
if that's
sad.
a theme that you have a real
Dude,
personal
yeah,
context
it's
for,
so
it will
much,
kill you. It will,
right.
just the mention of it. Well, it's like us. It's like anytime there's like a kid in a movie or parent
No,
kid thing
this
in a movie, I like immediately I'm on edge.
Everything
you
you're
know?
about to say is true, and all I'm
Okay.
saying is that is the saddest topic, man.
It is.
I
It is.
cannot deal with
I'm going to
it.
give you the facts of how
All right,
this
go
movie Reagan, unrelated to the realities of dementia
Okay,
and
fine.
Alzheimer's,
All right, yes.
the way this movie deals with this, right? So they bring back this fake character that they
Okay.
introduced in one scene and then forgot about. They bring this fake character is the one that has to like convince, not Reagan's doctors, not
No,
his associates. Everyone is lying to themselves around Reagan, and Nancy most of all. And so this Secret Service agent has to go to Nancy and be like, "Hey, I don't think we should let Ronald ride the horses anymore because he's fallen off the horse
So
and he's
sad.
steering into nowhere, and he's talking, he can't maintain a train of thought." And then Nancy, of course, is like, "No, you can't take the horses away from Ronnie. He loves riding those fucking horses. He's going to ride those horses, and for the rest of time, he's going to live forever.
I'm gonna cry.
Death is not real. If you take Ronnie off the horse, I'm going to take your head off your shoulders, you bitch."
Nancy
She's
was a
yelling
good
at this
wife.
guy, right? She's like, "No,
Nice.
Ronnie rides the horses. That's what Ronnie does." And the horse guy's like, "He's going to die if he keeps riding the horses, and there's nothing I can do to stop it." And she's like, "All right, we'll leave it up to Ronnie."
Okay, wait.
And I was like,
this
"No,
this is
you don't
true.
leave it up to
Wait,
Ronnie."
this is true. Okay, wait. That's so funny. Do you want to go on or
Yes, I'm going to keep going.
Tell
okay?
what happens next.
But, all right.
This is the end of the movie.
And so then this is the end of the movie. So he then has to, this poor Secret Service agent, again, not
This part's
Ronald's,
so-
not
yeah.
the doctors, not his family, the Secret Service agent, who's a fake character in the movie, whose only purpose is this plot point, has to walk out to Ronald Reagan, who's out like pretending to chop wood outside. It's just George Bush moving brush.
It's like the Will Ferrell
it's-
joke.
yes.
From
Yeah, it's like, this fence is fixed now. So it's Ronald Reagan with his cowboy hat, cosplaying as a cowboy, and this actual cowboy has to go out there and be like, "Sir, I don't think we should ride horses together." He's like breaking. It's like his horse buddy is breaking up with him. "I don't think we should ride horses anymore." Like, oh, why is that? And then Dennis Quaid.
Tip O'Neill said.
Dennis Quaid in what I will look. Dennis Quaid's still a good actor.
Quaid
Quaid nails this scene.
I haven't said my piece on Quaid
Okay.
yet. No, yeah.
Quaid nails. He does like 8 different things in this little shot.
He
they
makes
give
this
him.
moment work, and I
It's
got
too
sad,
good.
Brett.
All right, I'll give you that because that one Quaid moment is too good for the movie.
Wait, so tell him what happens.
all right,
I keep.
So then Quaid, he looks at me, and goes. So basically, Quaid, like even through the beginnings of dementia, understands what's being said to him and acknowledges that it's true, and then he finally, and so you see him go through this wave of emotions, and then he turns to the Secret Service agent and he goes, "One more ride." And the Secret Service agent is like, "Okay, one more ride."
Tears
All right, stop.
immediately.
And then you get this crazy scene that ends the movie where Ronald Reagan, with this Dennis Quaid plasters the biggest, dumbest smile on his face. He gets on that horse for one last ride, and he rides off alone into the darkness of dementia, but it is presented as the hero, the conquering hero on
John
one
Denver
last
starts
ride.
playing.
John Denver's Country Roads comes on, right? Which is such a funny choice because in my head I was like, this song is very specifically about West Virginia, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, are they gonna avoid the West Virginia lyrics? No. They're just as Ronald Reagan is riding off of Ronald Reagan, and I went back and looked because I was like, did I miss something? Ronald Reagan has no relation to the state of West Virginia, but as he's riding off on his one last ride before the darkness of time overtakes him, they play Country Roads, and the song swells and he's riding, and it's to country roads, take me home, West Virginia. And I was like, West Virginia has nothing to do with any of this.
Nothing.
Why any song? But they were so sold on Country Roads that they had to play it. And then at the very end, you knew it was coming. Freeze frame, slow zoom on Ronald Reagan's face on one last ride. And then, Joe, maybe the craziest move in the whole movie, cut to credits. What do they play side by side with the credits? Reagan's funeral. Basically in real time, you watch news footage of Reagan's casket. Margaret Thatcher weeping over this casket. Oh, Thatcher's never cried in her life until Ronald Reagan died. Her big old just bear tears, just not even normal human moisture, just coming out of her eyes and just dousing this casket. And then Nancy Reagan crying over his casket. This is all side by side with Robert Davi, Kevin Sorbo, Scott Stapp as Frank Sinatra. And meanwhile, Nancy's like, I love you, Dutch. I'll always.
So weird.
The movie's
weird.
crazy.
We're gonna talk later, and I won't go on and on. We're gonna talk later about Oliver Stone's Nixon.
Oh, I can't wait.
And Oliver Stone is a famous leftist who is, of course, making a movie about Nixon, an arch conservative. But it's an adult making a movie, so it's all about how bad Nixon was. But then there's a human element to him, and it sort of challenges Stone's own perception sometime of the man. In Reagan, there's whatever the opposite of the ability to interrogate your own desires is. It's the Reagan is just, there's not a single question mark about this man's ability to perform the act of politician well, or be a good president or help people. The movie has nothing. There's no but sometimes Reagan, the president of America, which means that this person is inherently flawed with lots of interesting details about the bad things they did. This movie's completely just totally uninterested in that. And I think you could have had a loving Reagan movie about your favorite guy, Ronnie Reagan, with a little undercurrents of any sort of darkness. But without that, Brett, this whole entire movie just feels like it's made for empty brain, weird children.
It's such a MAGA era movie because it is the biggest admission of defeat is when you are terrified to admit any weakness about the people that you admire.
So weird, right? Exactly.
It's the movie cannot even present him as human. It's so
weird.
Terrified to present any of these characters as human. Everything is just like meme after meme about Ronald Reagan owning the libs essentially over and over and over and over again. Here's a couple other things that happen in this movie if you can abide them. Reagan's first big inner sanctum meeting with the Republican power structure, and they're then in all these classic Reagan lines, they're why did you leave the Democratic Party, Ron? And Ron goes, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. They left me. Ha ha, chuckles all around the room. Followed by this question. So why do you want to campaign for Goldwater?
Yeah, I know.
I was
they left me.
He was never a liberal. He's a far right radical Republican.
They left me. It's the Democrats left you because they started supporting the Civil Rights Act.
Exactly.
Because the Southern Democrats, the racists, are over now. That's why the party left you.
Yeah, Nixon utilized the Southern strategy. Reagan was dyed-in-the-wool Southern strategy. The Southern strategy defines his whole approach to politics. But it was just so funny that that it's like, he's like, I left the Democratic Party because they weren't, pragmatic or whatever, and they're just campaigning for Goldwater, like, like whatever. So, the scene with the student protesters in Berkeley,
oh my gosh,
is crazy.
They really skip over a lot of stuff in this movie. And
I love
also
the heckler. Sorry, real quick. There's a heckler at Berkeley when Reagan gets out of the car. And what does the heckler say? He doesn't say like what a heckler would actually say, which is like, suck dick, you fascist. He says, hey, Governor Reagan, make love, not war, man. And then Reagan has some like gross sort of like response to that.
I made love to your mother last night.
Yeah, something along those lines, and everyone laughs, and you're supposed to laugh in the theater. At one point, he's trying to bargain with like the university chancellor or whatever, and he doesn't like how it's going. He goes, "I've had enough of this. I'm calling in the National Guard," i.e., I'm gonna fucking kill these kids.
Right, which happens, and then famously bombs Berkeley. None of that's in the movie. Just
no.
His
just
toughness, his tough talk against
these indulgent student activists. There's a later scene where a guy that looks like little baby Billy from the Righteous Gemstones and is a preacher like holds hands with Ron and Nancy around their like shitty little outdoor pool and like prays with them, and he looks in Ronald's eyes and he says, God wants you to be president one day. And Ronald's like, fuck. And then Nancy's like, fuck. And the movie doesn't intend this, but once again, it's literally like the first scene in Macbeth where the witches are like, you're going to be president. But they don't think that that's what they're doing, but that's what they're doing. And then later, Nancy is like, that preacher is kind of a kook, but he's on to something. And then she looks Ronald in the eyes and she goes, you might need to save us. The scene, Joe. It happens quickly, but it's very funny. The scene where Reagan is on TV and he's doing his like, are you better off than you were 4 years ago speech, and it cuts to like working class people like stopping what they're doing and watching it. Right? It cuts to three scenes of like working class people being like, this guy's on to something. The scenes that they cut to are so cheap looking. It's like shocking. There's the first thing they cut to is like cooks in like a kitchen, and they have like fancy cooks outfits on. It looks like a supply closet. It looks like our Forever Dog supply closet over here. It is so cheap, and they like I was also like, well, don't make them look like French chefs. If this is your set, make them look like short order cooks. But they make them look like fucking Michelin star chefs in the cheapest looking not a kitchen set ever. And then they cut to like a barber, and it looks like it's like somebody's bedroom in a apartment. Like it's like not a barber shop. And then they finally cut to a bar, and all the people at the bar turn around, and it's again like not, the shots are so close to like avoid showing you the wide shot, but these sets are so cheap. They're held together with tape. It's insane. There's a lot of Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan nostalgia, which I realized for the first time. Everyone's like, your dad's like nostalgia for like, that's when guys like, they didn't take politics too seriously and they would have a beer after it and laugh over everything. I realized that nostalgia boils down to a pretty like perverse thought, which is like, hey, isn't it great that the two most powerful politicians in America think that life is one big fucking game? And they don't really give a shit about any of this. Isn't that fun and refreshing? Shouldn't we go back to that? The Iran hostage return is because Iran was scared of Reagan, not because he like prearranged a deal with them before the election illegally. That's not mentioned. Much like the Reagan Library out in Simi Valley, this movie makes a meal out of the Hinckley assassination attempt. Oh my God, does it make a meal out of that? There's one shot of Colin Powell slamming down a telephone in like a war room meeting. There's a shot of Colin Powell slamming down a telephone, and the shot lingers on him as though he's about to say something, perhaps of importance. And the only reason I know it's Colin Powell is because he has a little badge that says Powell on it, and he's one of the only black characters in the entire movie. He slams down a phone, and it like stays on his close-up, and then it just cuts away from him and never goes back to him. Okay. Colin Powell does not have a line in the movie, although there's a shot that implies that he was supposed to have a line.
They cut it.
Oh God, I'm sorry. I have a couple more things. Margaret Thatcher. The Margaret Thatcher performance is so fucking funny in this movie. Margaret Thatcher is portrayed by Leslie Ann Down, who has done a lot of. Immediately, I was like, oh, she's like does BBC period soap operas, because she does Margaret Thatcher so over the top, so operatic, so deferential to Reagan. At one point when Reagan does his big Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall speech, which is like built up to with
That's the climax of the movie.
It's the climax of the movie. It's built up to with so much fucking anticipation and energy. And then after he says, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, they have like 3 cutaways like to reaction shots. His speechwriters like pumping their fists in the air, Nancy smiling. And it cuts to Margaret Thatcher. And she goes, "Well done, cowboy."
Cool. There's a lot of Margaret Thatcher, Reagan palling around in the film.
You're kind of like, are these two gonna fuck?
That's their thing.
What's the vibe?
It's the will they won't they of Thatcher, Reagan.
All right, Joe. I have one more thing to say about Reagan.
I'll go for it.
All right, please. Okay. All right. And then I'm gonna be done. I'm gonna put Reagan to sleep, and we'll never talk about it again.
Well, I'll talk about
it. We'll talk about it quite a bit. This whole goldfish thing.
Oh yeah.
This to me sums up again. It's the movie like not knowing what it's doing.
Yeah, this is
and
this
it
is a good moment
sums
to talk
up
about.
Reagan. It sums up Reagan to me and Nancy in a nutshell. So basically, this is a true story about when Ronald Reagan went to Geneva in the 1980s, and he was going to have his first ever meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev, and old neutral Switzerland, right? They're going to have it on neutral ground in Geneva, on the shores of Lake Geneva. He's going to meet with Gorbachev for the first time. This is a true story. The villa that he was staying in for this summit belonged to this guy, Prince Karim Aga Khan. Now, this guy and his children moved out of this villa temporarily so that Reagan and Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan could stay there for this summit, okay? Now, the only condition for them staying at this villa was that the youngest child, who was 10 years old, had a goldfish. And they just asked, their only condition was like, you can stay here for free. Beautiful villa on the shores of Lake Geneva. You just need to feed this goldfish every day. And Ronald Reagan saw this in like the welcome note, and he's like, I'll do it.
I'll feed
this goldfish. This is the reason I'm here in Lake Geneva. I'm going to feed this goldfish every day, and I won't let it die come hell or high water. Cut to 10 days later, he completely forgot about the goldfish and is just floating upside down dead in the bowl. And he's like, oh, damn it. I forgot about the goldfish, Nancy. I forgot to feed the goldfish, and now it's dead. And Nancy is like, just the coldest person in the earth. Nancy immediately is like, just buy a new goldfish. This kid won't know the difference. And then Ronald goes, no, Nancy. Every little boy knows their goldfish. Every boy knows their goldfish. Yeah. And I was like, what? That's not even folksy. Or that's not even a thing that every boy knows their goldfish. And Ronald goes, you know what? I'm going to write this boy a note. And he's supposed to be like meeting with Gorbachev.
Like, come on, Gorbachev.
They're like, come on,
right
there's the big meeting with Gorbachev. You got to go, Ronald.
It's happening like right now.
No. I'm going to write this boy a note about how I killed his goldfish. I'm going to write him a note.
Okay, but do it after, because we got to talk to the Soviet Union to end the Cold War, please.
It has to happen now. I'm going to write this note about this goldfish I killed to this little boy. I'm going to do it right now, because I'm Ronald Reagan, and I'm definitive, and I decide things, and I have integrity. And the his like assistant and Nancy, they look at each other and they go, that's Ronald. And Nancy literally goes, that's my Ronnie. Like it's a sitcom. She goes, that's my Ronnie. That's my Ronnie. And then Ronald Reagan sits down and he starts to write this note to this boy about killing his goldfish because he totally forgot to feed it for the last 10 days.
Sorry, I was trying to end the Cold War.
It like zooms in on Ronald writing this note, and the message, and then it shows Nancy like smiling at him lovingly. And the movie thinks that it's telling you, look at these salt of the earth people with their integrity, that even in the midst of these geopolitical battles, they'll stop to write a thoughtful letter to a little boy. When it's like, you fucking killed the goldfish. You did this. You're the ones that did that. You're not the heroes of this story. The movie in this moment, honestly, and this is why I think this is actually like a fantastic satire of Reagan hidden in the guise of a propaganda movie about how good Reagan was, is because this scene gets at the essence of Reagan. Is that Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan were incapable of not thinking of themselves as like the heroes of every situation and as like the best people in the room, the only ones with like the common sense and the integrity, et cetera, where it's like, you assholes had one job to do. You could have easily assigned this to one of your staff to feed this goldfish one. You know how hard it is to kill a fucking goldfish, starve a goldfish to death?
They simply should have not have accepted responsibility.
They should have either not accepted responsibility or passed it on to somebody else. But instead, they ignored.
Or where was his hand? Like why did they let him do this?
Thank you. And this is all real. This is a real story. This is in like Reagan biographies, okay? This is the essence of the Reagans, is that they center themselves in every narrative and they turn other people's suffering that they're responsible for into heroism, into their own heroism. That is like sociopathic levels of narcissism that after like killing this goldfish from neglect, it's just such a dumb little crime, like such a dumb thing that would have been so easy to not do. They sit there and Nancy's like smiling at him lovingly as he writes this letter, to this little boy. And Joe, I actually have a copy of the letter here. I found it online, what he wrote to the little boy, if I can read it out loud.
Sure.
Dear little boy, I killed your fucking goldfish. Fuck you, Dutch.
Jesus.
Crazy.
He wrote that?
Crazy that he wrote that and left that for the boy.
That's even worse than just getting a replacement goldfish. That's mean. I can't believe he wrote that. It's crazy.
All right.
Damn.
But honestly, watching that scene, I was like, this is, you couldn't come up with satire like this. Like it's like this is the essence of these two absolute soulless monsters, is this goldfish scene.
Folks, truth stranger than fiction sometimes.
Sometimes it is.
And you know what? That's just the facts here with the Reagan movie. My 2 cents is I thought Quaid, despite it all, charming and handsome.
No, Quaid. Look,
that's my review.
Quaid comes away unscathed.
Unfortunately, I walked out. I walked out feeling nothing different at all about Dennis Quaid, other than wow. Here's my actual thought about him in this movie was wow, he looks great.
No, yeah,
doesn't he?
And
he looks great.
He looks great. He looks incredible in the trailer for The Substance, which is gonna be fun as hell.
I love Dennis Quaid.
He
looks great.
He comes away completely unscathed.
I don't think it was a good performance in the sense that he sounded and walked like Ronald Reagan, but it was a bad performance in the sense that there's not just the character was thin.
He's just contributing.
The character was thin.
He's just playing Ronald Reagan in a Ronald Reagan propaganda movie. So there's that's the bad
part
of
limitation.
it. But I was like, oh, Dennis Quaid just is coming to work.
No harm, no foul.
Yeah, he's just like, what's the character I'm playing? Yeah. I mean, look, we know that his sympathies lean right, and I'm sure he was pumped to do this and was,
obviously. He but
like,
yes, he doesn't.
But just to be honest, when you're watching the movie,
great.
you don't put it on Dennis Quaid, you put it on the insane creators and writers of this movie.
Dude, honestly, minus the extremes.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in being mad at actors for their political views. I want my actors to be fucking weird. I want them to not be human. I want them to be oddballs. I want them to have opinions that are completely and totally inappropriate. I want them to not get vaccinated. I want them to be fucking insane people. I really do, because that is when we get the good stuff. I don't want our actors becoming really smart and savvy and understanding what they're supposed to say when and having normal opinions and stuff. I need them weird. Need them weird, baby. Keep them weird.
All right. Speaking of weird, let's finish this up by, I want to pick just off the top, I'll list them out here. The top 5 weirdest performances / casting choices in Reagan. All right. The top 5 weirdest casting choices.
Mm-hmm.
I think at 5 I would put there's a very brief scene with C. Thomas Howell as the Secretary of Defense, and it's so funny. Casper Weinberger. So there's a scene where it's it's something like, well, let's ask the brilliant Secretary of Defense, and it cuts over to Soul Man C. Thomas Howell just standing there trying to do the most serious face he can summon, and he's like, I think we need to escalate, covert military operations in the South America. But it's just it's C. Thomas Howell doing one day of work and just trying to do Secretary of Defense gravitas, and it's really funny. So I got C. Thomas Howell. Who else you got in the top 5?
Obviously, Kevin Dillon.
Kevin Dillon's Jack
He might
Warner is
He's so good, bro.
one or two.
It's,
yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
up there.
Yeah. It's very
He's
funny.
so good in the
it's
movie.
Very funny.
Casting choices in this movie.
Here's one I've got
Quaid,
for you.
Sorbo.
Stapp. Well,
Stapp.
I think Stapp is Frank Sinatra's 1.
Yeah.
I would put Kevin Dillon's Jack Warner 2. 3 is Robert Davi as Leonid Brezhnev.
Oh, yeah.
Robert Davi just like the dumb thug in a bunch of mob movies in the 80s, and they dragged him out of retirement to play Leonid Brezhnev,
Tough.
the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union from 1964 to 1982. So he's got Robert Davi has to do like I'm in charge of the USSR face, and it's great. Kevin Sorbo is Reverend Cleaver. Dan Lauria, the dad from the Wonder Years as Tip O'Neill was pretty good.
Yes.
So I guess
He did a great tip.
I mean, I feel like we have to put Dennis on here though.
Yeah.
All right. So I would say let's put Dennis at 1. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Scott Stapp as Frank Sinatra is 2. Okay. Kevin Dillon as Jack Warner 3.
Yep.
Robert Davi as Leonid Brezhnev 4.
That's a good one.
And then C. Thomas Howell as Casper Weinberger.
It's a hell of a
5.
cast. Hell of a cast.
Top 5 casting. I don't know what you're saying. Top 5
top five members of the cast. Top 5
Top
cast
5
members
performances.
of Reagan. Top 5 Reagan performances.
No, but I would put I would have to put Leslie Ann Down as Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, she's
Top
good.
6 performances in Reagan. All right, that's our Reagan review. Dear God.